Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Our first interview of the morning is with a senior research scientist at the UCT Lung Institute. He's a trained medical virologist and epidemiologist. He is Dr. Shameem Jaumdally, and he's here to talk to us about what we're all now wondering and worrying about, a new variant that seems to have sprung up here in South Africa and has been picked up in a few other countries internationally as well. It is the C.1.2. How worried should we be about it? What is this all about and how do we move forward? Dr. Shameem Jaumdally, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program and wonderful to have
Walaikum
you
salam.
on air.
Shukran for having me.
Should we be worried? We're hearing about the C.1.2 or C.1.2 new variant every so often. Just when we think it's safe to go out again and breathe, we're hearing about newer and newer variants. Is this going to be the state of play going forward as far as COVID-19 is concerned?
Unfortunately, yes, and this is something that we were predicting right at the beginning of the epidemic, and which was why we said that there was a sense of urgency to develop vaccine to counter the emergence of such variant. And interestingly, the C.1.2 variant that we're seeing right now in circulation across most provinces in South Africa had evolved from the first virus that dominated in our first wave in South Africa last year. And the worrying thing is that it carries most mutation than any other variant that we have so far in around the world. And we still need to develop data and generate data to evaluate whether it is more transmissible, because it also carries certain mutation that we have seen in some of the predominant variants right now, like Delta, that makes them more transmissible. And nor do we still have any conclusive evidence as to whether there would be a problem with regard to vaccine efficacy.
What's worrying is we don't have any clear-cut answers right now. And we also have a situation where there's a lot of anti-vaxxers, and they're going to possibly use this as an excuse to not go ahead and vaccinate. Let's look at the population that has already been vaccinated. Do they have some degree of protection as far as this new variant is concerned?
I will not put my head out there and say yes that they will have like a high enough level of efficacy. We're normally driven by evidence, by data that we can produce and that we can be confident of. So what I will use instead is the efficacy of a vaccine against other variants that have already been seen to predominantly affect like countries across the world right now. And data coming out of countries like the USA, the United Kingdoms, and even Israel for that matter, and South Africa now, who the greater proportion of people being vaccinated, vaccines are still working in the face of emerging variants. So this is the picture that we have right now. And as I said, this variant has not gone while as fast as, for example, the Delta has. It was picked up in around 1% of the sample that were collected in South Africa. These are obviously representative samples in June, and it only went up to 3% in July. So we still need to understand what would be the implication in terms of transmissibility and also in terms of the efficacy of different vaccines. But so far, we go on with the vaccine rollout. We have indication that vaccines work even against most of the variants that we have documented so far around the world.
Okay, I'm not a scientist, and I do hope that my next question does make sense to you. Does it also mean that one extra mutation could cancel out the effects of another? Does that make sense?
So I get the direction of your question. So just to put it out there, mutations are generally chance event, right? A virus or a bacterium or any other microorganism for that matter, any microbes that are as small as this would have mutation incorporated in their cycle of replication that happens. And most of these mutations would normally render that microbe less fit and possibly die and not be able to infect or carry on with the replication cycle that it has. But some of these eventually gives what we call fitness. It makes the microbe fitter, either in terms of transmissibility, either in terms of the disease that it may cause, or the duration that it may stay inside the body. And there are very few instances where one specific mutation can actually cancel another one. But again, these are extremely rare events. And what we worry about are those mutations that specifically happen in a certain area. For example, with the COVID vaccines, they have all been raised or they have been developed to be able to target the spike protein that is on the envelope of the coronavirus. So if there are changes that happens in that spike protein, this will mean that it will look further and further from what we thought it looked like when we developed these vaccines. So what will happen then is the more it changes, the less likely the vaccine and whatever reaction that the vaccine produces will be able to pick up that this is the actual coronavirus and that you need to fight it. So this is the issue with mutation. And what is more of importance is rather where it happens.
Okay, so this is what I'm understanding. What you're saying is that having more mutations doesn't necessarily mean that it's more dangerous or it's more necessarily transmissible. But
Correct.
what I'm also hearing is scientists like yourselves will have to be involved in absolutely ongoing scientific research to continue with coming up with better and more efficient vaccinations going forward. And the fact that COVID-19 is here, possibly like the flu, possibly for the rest of our lives. And for the rest of our lives, we will possibly have to be immunized on a regular basis, possibly on an annual basis. Would I be correct in having said that?
Uh, Partly correct, but I think, as a scientist, I don't want to put all my eggs in the vaccine basket. We know from the month that have already elapsed living in an epidemic context that we have so many strategies that have been confirmed by science to be effective against, the transmission of this virus, whether it's the wearing of masks, whether it's the use of sanitizers, whether it's having some form of restriction in the way we meet people, where we meet people, when we meet people, who we meeting, how we work, how we go to schools. Yes, the vaccine will definitely help those, especially who are the most vulnerable. People need to understand that right now we are dealing with what we call a novel coronavirus. There is the word novel in its name because it's new. We're still trying to understand what this virus does, how it evolves, what is the best way of countering it. And the target is always a moving target. And as you said, unfortunately, from the looks of things, because it is constantly mutating due to the transmission that is still happening, even in countries that have high level of vaccination right now, because of the unequitable access to vaccine across the world. We will always have cycles where this is going to happen, possibly for years to come. But the one important thing, and you've mentioned anti-vaxxers, and I know they are already going to hide the fact that this is something that is just new now, and probably put that on the fact that the vaccination now has given rise to variant. Let me make that clear. All the variants that we know right now, the alpha, the beta, the delta, and the gamma, have all emerged before the rollout of any form of vaccination. most of these variants had already been picked up in samples that were archived from as early as August last year. So vaccination has nothing to do with the emergence of variant, and this is something that I wanted to make sure that I point out to everybody out there listening.
Okay, I know this is just semantics, but this C.1.2 does not yet have a Greek alphabet designation. What does that say to us, and what is the World Health Organization saying about this new variant? So, the significance of a Greek alphabet in front of the variant and the World Health Organization's position on this new variant.
I'll be honest with you, I don't really know the protocol that goes into the nomenclature and the naming of what they call variant of concern and variant of interest. But what I can tell you is that this virus, the C.1.2, as we're speaking of right now, as I said earlier in in my conversation with you, emerged and evolved from the very first one that we experienced in our first wave, that dominated our first wave in South Africa. And that virus was called C.1. So you can now understand why it's called C.1.2. It's not because somebody just decided that this was, like a fancy name, or maybe that's the first letter of my name. It's simply because of helping people to understand where it comes from and how it evolved.
And the World Health Organization's position on this? Are they just waiting and watching and seeing how it evolves before they make some sort of a comment or statement regarding the new variant?
Absolutely. The World Health Organization, like many other bodies right now fighting against COVID-19, are driven by evidence that are generated by people with very strong background in whatever they're working on, and also with like a very credible track record of actually, uh, providing data that people can believe and that is honest. So in the weeks to come, I am sure that you will have more studies now that will be published on the efficacy of vaccines against that variant, on the transmissibility of this new variant as we described it, whether it's better or poorer, and a lot of other factors and very important mechanisms that are associated with, curbing transmission right now.
Dr. Shameem Jaumdally, thank you indeed for being with us on the show this morning and sharing your insights. He is
Thank you for
senior
having me.
research scientist at the UCT Lung Institute, trained medical virologist and epidemiologist, talking to us about the new variant C.1.2 that is making its rounds, emerging not only in South Africa but in several other countries. 8:32 exactly. This is News and Views right here on Salam Media.